we'll be talking about the exposure sheets first, then I'm going to talk about the layouts, and then we're going to do some action analysis, and then I'm going to leave it up to you to do the remainder of the stuff, which will be thumbnailing, roughing your keys and your breakdowns, doing pencil tests, doing your timing, and then coming up with the final cleaned up version with all the in-betweens on it. So those are all the various steps that we're going to talk a little bit about today. The first thing I wanted to discuss was the exposure sheet. So I've given each of you roughly about 12 exposure sheets. If you're running your project at 30 frames per second, which is sometimes the default time in some instances, each page basically represents 1 second of time because there are 30 frames altogether here. If you're going to work to a 24 frame per second system, which is fine, and probably the way that you should work it to, you're going to have to basically set an extra timing out on the side here to indicate your individual seconds, just so you can keep track for yourself how long you are into your project. So let's just go through the exposure sheet. We've discussed this before previously, but I just want to go through it again to explain to you what every part of the exposure sheet is. So we have our Whodunit, what is it, section up at the top up here, which has our production number, the scene footage, which you'll fill in at the end after you've filled out your entire project and done all your timing and shot your stuff. You'll come up with your final scene footage here. The description is essentially just a short sentence to describe what's going to be happening in your scene. So for this instance, we're doing the step up, jump down. We'll start with the basic description will be character steps up the stairs, pauses at the top, then jumps off onto the ground. Right? So that's what you write up into this description area here. Now is the Whodunit section, which indicates who all the different people are that contributed to this scene. So you are the animator, so you're going to fill your name in there. You will ultimately become the assistant when you start doing your in-betweens, and so you can fill that in, and eventually you'll shoot it and you'll be the camera person as well, but you don't write that in until you've actually done that stage. The number of drawings, you'll figure that out later on when you've completed all your rough keys and timed the whole thing to figure out what your exact timing is going to be, so you'll fill that in later on. Sheet number, we've got 12 sheets, but that's not necessarily the number of sheets that you're going to use depending on the timing that you're going to be doing. So we're just going to fill out the first number on each page. So you write 1 on your first one, then obviously your second sheet you would write 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to the point that you've got all your sheets that you have right now. If you need more, you can grab some more later on in the classroom. I'll leave them in there, and you can continue to add on. So once you've finalized your actual timing for the overall piece in your pencil test version, then you'll determine the number of drawings you have, which will determine the length of the entire scene, how many frames you have for the whole thing, which will then determine how many pages you've got. And once you've figured out how many pages you've got, you then fill in your final number. So then you'll have 1 of, let's say it's 15. 1 of 15, 2 of 15, 3 of 15, 4 of 15, etc. Right? So you can fill that in later on. Special instructions would be for any type of a camera move, truck in, truck out, pan, anything like that, which at this point we're not dealing with, so we really don't have to fill anything in there. Then our vertical sections that are in here worked from left to right. Our first one is our soundtrack, which we're not dealing with because we're not doing any sound. But let's say our character was working to an actual soundtrack and we had footfalls for each of the steps as the character goes up the step. That would be predetermined by the soundtrack, and it may be someone who's actually acting it out and determining the timing and saying this is the specific timing. So there would be a hit point in the this next section here, which is the sound effects. You would have a beat for that actual footfall. So let's say there was a footstep that took place right here. You'd have an X there, and over here, if there was dialogue, you would write your dialogue in. Your action notes would say this is a step. So off to the side there, you'd write step. Okay, so it's clear that that's what's taking place there. Let's say there was an anticipation or something like that. You would write in anticipation. You'd have the number of frames that the anticipation took place over, and then your key point would be at that point that it's indicating, and then your action, etc. So you would write all that stuff out in long form so that you can glance at it and see what's going on. Your next section are your various levels. So it starts over here with the bottom, number 1, and goes all the way over to number 6. We're probably not going to be using that many. We're going to only use basically 2 levels on this assignment, where we have our background, which is the layout that I've given you. This is our layout here, which has the set of stairs that your character is going to walk up, and we're going to determine what side the character is going to walk up. So you can have your character starting over here, going up this way to the top, coming over to this side, and then they're going to jump off of this edge here, in which case we're going to redraw our layout by basically eliminating the stairs here, and this edge here will just be a flat wall, so you can trace it over and redraw it. Same thing is true if you choose to do it the opposite way. You've got your character over here, your character goes up the stairs, they turn, and then they jump off this side. We're just going to get rid of the stairs here and just make that a straight wall over on that side. Right? So you determine which side your character is going to be moving. So this will be our background that we would indicate in this section here, and we're going to have one level, which would be our bottom level number 1, which will have all your numbers in it. Now, what I usually do whenever I'm planning out my animation, we've discussed this before, now that we're into the phase where we're no longer doing cycle animation, we're now getting a character to go from point A to point B to point C. In this case here, point A is at the bottom of the stairs, point B is at the top of the stairs, and point C will be at the bottom on the ground over on this side over here. So our character is actually moving through space to get to their ultimate destination. So we're going to be using our lettering system to number all of our drawings before we get into any timing. And so I'll use one of the levels over here off to the side for that. So I might use level 3. I'll use anything but level 1, and I usually leave a space in between. So when I'm marking off my drawings in my rough timing, I'll probably indicate that drawing A goes here. And then whatever my timing works out to be, where my character anticipates, I'll go into drawing number B. Now at the beginning of this assignment, what I want you to do is I want you to have your character standing at the stairs, 3/4 rear view, getting ready to go up the stairs. We're going to hold that drawing for 1 second. Okay? I would prefer it to be an animated hold, which means you're going to trace back the drawing twice in order to get the character just to shimmy a little bit, which means that you'll have 3 drawings that will run for basically 24 frames. So we're going to mark off where our 24th frame is and then have that drawing held to that length. So let's go to our next section, which is your exposure, which indicates your frame count. So right here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. So we've got 30 frames altogether there. So on our first sheet, we're going to mark off our drawing, our frame 10, and then every odd one. So we're going to go 11, and then 13, 15, 17, 19, and then to 20, 21, 23, 25, 27, 29, and finally 30. Okay. So we're going to hold our first drawing for 24 frames, so our 24th frame is right there, which means that at that frame, that's where we indicate we're going to hold drawing A until that point, and then our character is then going to go into their anticipation. Right? So then we'll indicate how many frames we're going to anticipate the character back, and that will be drawing B. So let's say the anticipation takes, I don't know, let's say 5 drawings, right? Then we'd have to count off 10 frames in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we go to our next sheet, 7, 8, 9, 10. It would be on this frame, on the second sheet of paper, that would be drawing B. And we'd circle that one. And then we continue on with it. Whatever our timing works out to be, we'd work in to C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, etc., etc. And if you're going to work to your alpha system and you're going to do your broad keys first, and you're going to put in secondary keys after that, you may go in and have an A, a B, a B1, B2, B3, and then go to C, C1, C2, C3, C4, then to D. So you'll have multiple keys that are broken down inside those primary keys. It just depends on how you approach it. But that's basically how I want you to number your drawings to start off with. Then once you've settled on your actual timing, you'll then go in and start dropping your actual numbers. So as I mentioned before, we're going to have an animated hold at the very beginning. So if that animated hold takes place over 24 frames, it means you're going to have 2 traceback drawings and your key. So that'll be drawing number 1. Okay. And if you think of this ahead of time, your second traceback will be number 2, and your next traceback will be number 3. Then we're going to cycle through 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that's held until that frame. And then our next in between is going to be drawing number 4, and 5, 6, and on to the next key. All right. So this part here is the animated hold. Okay. If, let's say, you choose not to do this, not to think in advance that you're going to have 3 drawings that are animated hold, and you just have your drawing number 1, And then this drawing over here is actually number 3 instead, or let's say this is number 2, sorry. And then yeah, this would be number 2, this would be number 3, this would be number 4. And you forgot about these 2 drawings in here, these 2 and 3 ones, which are trace backs. Then you can alternately call them 1A, 1B. So you got 1, 1A, 1B. Okay? So anytime you have to add in an extra drawing, you simply give it a letter after the end of it. So it's the opposite of what we did with our alpha system at the very beginning. We go A, B, C. If you have to drop in in-betweens or major breakdowns or keys, secondary keys in there, you would call it A1, A2, A3. So now you flip it over when you're in your numbering system. If you have to add in extra drawings in there, you call it 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. All right? You understand? So we're just flip-flopping our idea there. Next section is camera instructions. We have no camera moves in here, so we're not going to do any truck-ins or truck-outs or fade to black, which would all be indicated in this section here. What your start frame of your truck-in is, what the final frame is of your truck-in is, how many frames it takes place over, if you've got a cross dissolve or a fade to black or anything like that, that would all be indicated in here. Field size you would indicate in here. I want that filled in. You're going to figure out what your field size is going to be for this scene. Probably be somewhere around a 9 or a 10 field. So you have to use your field guide grid to determine what the field size is of this area here. Figure out what the field size is so that you're not shooting your pegs. I don't want to see any pegs on any pencil test from this point on. All right, we're shooting to an actual field size. So determine what your field size is and then write that in. It's not going to be any north, south, east, west, so we're not moving to an off-center position anywhere. It's a center, center, so you would write center, cent, cent. So if it's, let's say, 10 field, you write in 10, cent, cent. Right? That indicates that we're dealing with a 10 field center, center. All right? So fill in your entire exposure sheet. The first thing you need to do, obviously, is go through and number your exposures. Okay, that doesn't require any pre-planning of any sort. It's just filling in the blanks. So you take your 12 sheets of paper, you fill them all in, and then you come back, once you've got all your numbers filled in, you come back and you find every 24th frame is 1 second. So in the camera instructions, since we have no camera instructions, we can use this column to indicate this is where our individual seconds are. So right here, we would write in 1, 0, 0. That's 1 second right there. When we get to the 48th frame, that's 2, 0, 0. And on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you know exactly where your 1 seconds are. Right? So fill all that stuff in, and then we go to the next stage, which is basically starting to plan out our animation.